mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring. All of our classes have the word coach or coaching in them, and they're taught by coaches for coaches.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills, even some of the mental performance behind, what it goes into being an athlete. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach, so I thought joining this master's program would help me learn different ways to attack my job. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it.
All right, well, welcome everybody to FSU Coach Live. Dave, I always have drama because that intro video doesn't play properly on my screen, so I never know when it's actually finished, and I have to take a guess. Well, I'm joined by David Mullins. He's the ITA, Intercollegiate Tennis Association COO. Dave, thanks so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in this role, and some of your coaching experiences.
Sure, Tim. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. I grew up in Dublin, Ireland, and always knew if I wanted to continue my tennis career, I guess I'd need to come over to the States. My parents weren't going to allow me just to go play full-time tennis. I had to get my education, and very grateful they pushed me in that direction. Ended up going to Fresno State in California on a tennis scholarship and had 4 great years there. Played a little bit professionally afterwards for about 6 months to a year, ran out of money in a hurry, and decided it was time to enter the real world. So I did my undergraduate work in finance, and my first, professional role. I did a bit of coaching here and there at clubs to pick up some cash where I could, but my first professional role was actually working on the Mercantile Exchange in Chicago, and absolutely hated it. It's like, what am I doing? This is the worst job in the world. I mean, the money and all the rest of it's good, but I was like, I will go coach college tennis for $1 an hour. Just get me into that world, because I fell in love with college athletics during my playing time at Fresno. I didn't know a whole lot about the whole intercollegiate system. And you come to America and you can't believe the facilities, and you have this full-time coach, and they're giving you this equipment, and you're traveling all over the country. So I was just, by my junior year, I was captain of the team, and I loved kind of bringing along the younger players. And it was clear to me when I was working in the finance world, I wanted to go into college coaching. I didn't have an interest in working at an academy or coaching a pro or anything like that. It was college or nothing. So I got my first opportunity at DePaul University on the men's side. It was associate head coach there. Very young, I think 24 years old, didn't have a clue really what I was doing. I think the seniors, I had 4 seniors, they were about the same age as me or close to it. But what a blast. I had so much fun, knew that was the career for me, and then moved over to the women's side. I was assistant women's tennis coach at Northwestern University for 3 years. By my final year there, we were number 1 in the country. So it was kind of the world opened up to me in terms of opportunities that summer. I was National Assistant Coach of the Year, and had a few opportunities, and ultimately landed at the University of Oklahoma, where I coached for 8 years. I was the head coach of the women's team at OU, and then decided that I was ready to get out. I definitely had my ups and downs those 8 years. It wasn't all gravy by any means. And knew I wanted to move into the administration world. I got my master's in intercollegiate athletic administration at OU, and actually moved back to Ireland for 3 years to manage a sports club back there and gain that administrative experience. And I also served on a lot of committees, served on the board of directors for the Irish Tennis Federation. And that led me to the ITA 3 years later, which is based here in Phoenix, Arizona. And so, nearly on 4 years as the COO at the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, and loving being on this side of the sport. I don't miss coaching as much as maybe some people might think.
I have a lot of questions based on what you just told me. So I want to start right back near the beginning, which was you finished your collegiate career, you started playing pro, and you said, I quote, "I ran out of money." Talk a little bit about that, because this isn't the first time I've heard somebody say that as somebody trying to make it as a pro. The assumption is if you play tennis, you play pro tennis, you're making bank.
Yeah. A small percentage are making bank. If you're top 100 in the world, you're doing okay. Even at 100 in the world, I don't know that you're able to afford a mortgage or anything like that, or to be able to support a family. Maybe if you have enough years at it. But it's very different from a lot of sports. My 17-year-old's on an academy contract with the pro soccer team here in town, the Phoenix Rising, and I'm looking at it going, I mean, what a good deal. I mean, these players have, coaches, support staff, athletic trainers. Their training is set up for them every day. All their travel expenses are taken care of. As a tennis player, you're on your own, and you're just out there fighting for your life, basically. And at the entry level, the pro system, you're lucky if you've made a couple of $100 that week, and you've probably spent, 2,000. So the math just doesn't add up. I mean, you run out of money in a hurry. You've got to find other ways, maybe playing for a league team, maybe playing money events that don't have ranking points associated with them. But you get an injury. I mean, I got an injury after 6 months, and I spent a lot of money just rehabbing. You don't have a support system. So not that I would have made it. I have no regrets. I'm glad I did it. But yeah, I would have liked to play maybe a little bit longer.
I'm curious then, from your perspective now as an administrator, how you fix that problem, because tennis isn't the only sport with challenges like that. We could point to many sports where, unless you are the cream of the crop, the rest of the players are hopeful they make it, but often phase out after a year, maybe 2 years, where they realize this isn't paying dividends. I could have a normal job making far more money in a much less stressful environment. How do we fix that problem?
Yeah, I mean, the solutions are probably different from one sport to the next. I mean, I know for tennis, there has been a lot of discussion over the years, and players like Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic have actually been quite vocal about this, and trying to have more of the money filter down to the lower levels. And there have been some adjustments made, and increased prize money at the lower levels, down to about 400 in the world or so. But after that, it's still a challenge. I mean, tennis, it does actually have a pretty poor reputation when it comes to gambling issue as well. I mean, you've got players out there who are 700, 800 in the world to make ends meet. They're throwing matches, to try and get some extra cash so they can keep the dream alive. And obviously, you don't want anybody to go down that pathway. But it's definitely a serious issue. But I still don't know what that cutoff is. I mean, who are the players? I don't think any studies have been done on who are the players who really were good enough to play at the top level, who fizzled out because they didn't have that investment. I mean, my roommate in college, a guy named Peter Luchak, who's from Australia, didn't have a lot of money behind him, but figured out a way to claw his way up the system very quickly, and got to 65, 70 in the world, made third round of Australian Open a couple of times, and he didn't have the backing of the federation. So I believe, Tim, if you're good enough, you're going to find a way to make it. There might be some challenges along the way. There might be, you might have to kind of spend money to make money early on. But I don't know. I don't know if it's as big an issue. I would like to see it tennis. A lot of comparisons are made to golf. And I think the golfers have figured out how to to make a lot of money, further down in the ranks, but they're also regionalized. I mean, you have the PGA Tour, that's America. So you don't, in tennis, you could be flying from India to Poland,
Yeah.
and then Poland to Florida. I mean, the expenses associated with that versus golf, okay, I make the cut, I get paid, and then I go on to the next kind of regional event that probably is not that far away. So I don't have the solutions, but tennis has a lot of money at the very top. How that trickles down, are the top players willing to take a little bit less? Depends on the player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Now you went into becoming an assistant coach for a men's team and then switched over to a women's team. I'm curious what your experiences are having coached both males and females. What are the similarities and differences being in those roles?
Yeah, I think initially, now we're going back quite a ways, but I think when I spoke to other people as I was making that transition, and mostly male coaches who were coaching women, I think they over exaggerated some of those differences, to be honest. And maybe it's generational. I mean, maybe the the genders aren't as far apart as they were maybe 50 years ago. Again, I haven't seen any literature and studies on this, but in terms of maybe the sensitivity factor that we talk about, I don't know that I think we have in our minds these generalizations that the guys are tough and they can take criticism and that, they're more resilient than the women, and I didn't see that. I definitely felt like criticism, people okay, people take it in different ways. Nobody likes to be criticized, regardless of how thick they say their skin is. Some handle it better than others and channel it in different ways. But in terms of that side of it, I didn't see as many differences. I think the big difference was around competition. I think, from a practice perspective, the men's side, they seemed very happy to go out and compete on a daily basis, whether it's in a silly warm-up running drill, a game of handball, a baseline game. Whereas I felt like on the women's side, competition, especially amongst their teammates, was a struggle for many of them. If you ask them to go play a set, they'd be very resistant, and one player may just give up completely because for whatever reason they didn't want to impact the relationship with their teammate. So I actually think that the day-to-day practice, getting the men ready to play, a dual match on the weekend, I think that's actually easier. I think the men's coaches have it a little bit easier because they just love to compete. But with the women, not necessarily dual matches, playing against other schools, I don't think they're like, yeah, we want to go beat them. But I think that internal struggle, I think the relationships are more important. I think maybe the men were able to duke it out on the court, get into any issues they had, and then shake hands afterwards and move on. And I felt like with the women, that took a little bit longer. So I think that's the main difference. Obviously, there's some physical differences in terms of, early on, trying to you come in as a man into the women's game, and you expect these athletes to be able to do what the men are able to do physically, like say in tennis, hit a kick serve on a second serve. That's very difficult for a lot of women. And, so you have to adapt, like, okay, they're not going to necessarily develop a kick serve, or a few of them are, so you need to develop a slice serve instead. So there's little subtle differences like that. But I think competition was probably the biggest difference, and how they approach competition.
And then you went from being a successful assistant coach, according to your awards anyway, to becoming a head coach. What was the process for you deciding where to go? Because I'm guessing if you're winning a national award like that, there's not just one university coming along and saying, hey Dave, we're kind of interested in having you come be a head coach. What was it like going through that process and making a decision of where to go? And and then transitioning from somebody who's number 2 or 3 to being the guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that process, I mean, University of Oklahoma is a huge juggernaut, and
Yeah.
you know, I knew their reputation in football. Again, coming from Ireland, I'm not maybe as clued into football and basketball as some others. I enjoy watching it and all the rest of it, but I don't know necessarily the history as much. And when you say OU, you think of Bob Stoops and, you know, the history that they've had there. Um, I wasn't as clued into that, but when I went for my interview, they were in the process of building a new indoor tennis facility. So that demonstrated a commitment from them that tennis mattered to their athletic department. It's not, sometimes you go on these interviews and they're saying, oh yeah, here's the plans. We're going to build this new facility and it's going to be ready in 2 years. And it's 10 years later and it's still not built. So to actually see the foundations in the ground, you knew they were making that commitment. And I think they were ready to elevate the program to a new level, and gain an understanding of what that meant. Like they didn't necessarily know actually how much money had to be spent on recruiting. You know, where do coaches go? Because the coaches that were there prior had been there for a very long time and kind of, you know, hadn't maybe adjusted to what was required as that world was changing, as there was greater investment into Olympic sports. And so it ended up still being a very difficult decision. I was happy at Northwestern. I loved the head coach. I loved the team. We had most of the team returning. We had another shot at a national title. My wife's family was in Chicago. She was pregnant with our second child. So I vacillated. I went back and forth. One day I was accepting the job, and the next day I was like, no, I'm staying. And it ended up being a very difficult decision and not as easy as I think some people make it out to be. And going to a new place. I mean, I'm again growing up in Dublin, Ireland, which is a liberal, you know, European city. I played college tennis in California. You know, I've been working in Chicago. Moving to Norman, Oklahoma, it's a culture shock. It's very different, and so there was definitely some hesitancy there. So yeah, I wouldn't discount how hard those decisions are. And so, especially when you're happy, if you're unhappy in your situation, then okay, go for it. But I was really happy with the setup we had and could wait another couple of years to be a head coach. It happened very quickly. I mean, I was 3 years as an assistant coach. I wasn't expecting to get a head coach at a Power 5 institution at 28. And you know, I'm not sure that's a wise decision on behalf of the athletic administration. You know, I obviously did well in the interview and had good good recommendations and all the rest of it. But looking back, I'm not sure I was ready for it. So, but I think your second question was then that transition from assistant coach to head coach. Yeah, that's you feel a huge amount of pressure. I mean, all of a sudden now you're the one making all the decisions. I'd heard of decision fatigue, but I didn't actually know what that felt like. But pretty quickly, you're just faced with a million decisions, and you go into that role. I mean, I was working 16, 18 hours a day, just trying to get the program started, get it moving in a different direction. Um, you know, my wife's pregnant. She's just made a move. I wasn't the greatest father. I wasn't the greatest husband. I was just all consumed by the job and trying to prove probably to the athletic director and other, I don't want to say he was doubted. He believed in me, but I'm sure there was other coaches who'd gone for that job going, why are they hiring this unproven assistant at 28? So then I have that in my head, and it's just, you know, I've got to put the nose down and just work as hard as I can to get this going in a different direction and prove that I'm worthy of this job. And so again, the on-court stuff, that's all easy. That came naturally. I felt very comfortable developing players. felt good around the culture piece. But it's more the administrative role. It's all of a sudden you're taken away from the tennis court and you're now sitting in meetings, and you have to be a jack of all trades. I mean, when you're a tennis coach, you have to be the lead marketer, you have to be the lead fundraiser. You need to get people to believe in your program and care about your program. You're not necessarily going to get the administrative support to do that. So yeah, making that switch from being all about development and recruiting to now I've got to be good at everything, great at nothing, good at everything kind of thing as a head coach. So it was, yeah, it's a difficult transition for sure.
Going back to, I don't think I've ever asked this question, so I'm kind of interested. Going back to becoming the D1 head coach, how did that happen? Or how does it happen? Are people contacting you? Do you see job applications open and are you applying? Is it a network thing?
Mm-hmm.
How does it work?
It can be all those things. Oftentimes, I think more and more of the Power 5 D1s are actually using these, headhunting services these days, even for Olympic sports, which is interesting. But I mean, you still have a process to follow. Even if they reach out to you, they'll say,
Sure.
"Hey, are you interested? If so, please put in your cover letter and resume. Here's the link." But oftentimes it's finding a way to indicate your interest. And as a head coach, that's a challenge because you don't want to upset your current administration. So you're usually maybe asking a go-between to figure out if there might be interest in you, making that move. As assistant coach, I think it's a little easier, and there's an expectation that you're putting yourself out there, and hopefully you have the support of your head coach. But yeah, there's a number of different ways it can happen. And I think sometimes coaches underestimate the importance of the relationships that they've built within the industry or within the community. And sometimes you'll see assistant coaches burning a lot of bridges, like they're playing a dual match and they're, yelling at the referee, or they're, just their sportsmanship may not be where it needs to be. And the opposing head coach is looking at that, and now they get a call about this assistant coach. Hey, you're in the same conference as whoever the coach is. Have you played against them? What do you think? These administrators are going to do their homework. And so when you've maybe rubbed somebody else the wrong way, you haven't realized that they may actually have an influence in your future and you don't know about it. So yeah, it happens a lot of different ways. But I think if a coach sees something they're interested in, I think get their resume, cover letter, apply straight away, and then figure out how to get to who is the person. It's rarely the athletic director. It's usually one of the associate athletic directors who's leading the search. Mm-hmm. How do I get in front of that person? Is it calling them directly? Is it sending them an email? Is it having somebody who I know knows them or has some touch point with them and asking them to reach out on my behalf? But I think you've got to be, aggressive is the wrong word. I've seen people take it too far and, show up at the office of the athletic director and, hey, I want this job. And the athletic director's like, yeah, just go through the normal process. Right. Pressing me, showing them up an unscheduled meeting and telling me why you're the best person for the job. It's a balancing act.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you had, I think, an 8-year career at OU, and you mentioned ups and downs. Sometimes on these shows, we get the correct answers of where things may not be as portrayed as they really are. And I'm curious what you meant by the ups and downs, because for most of us looking on the outside, we look at Dave Mullins, head coach of OU tennis. Wow, nice gig. Bet he gets paid well. I wish I had that job one day.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit about what that was really like.
Yeah, look, and I don't want to be moaning or complaining here. It is a great job, and you're doing something that you love, and obviously passionate about tennis. Played since I was age 10, but I think the where the ups and downs are really kind of, they're family based, and trying to balance. And look, this is the case in a lot of industries. It's not just college athletics, but as I said, and again, it might be different sport by sport, but tennis is a year-round sport. We have a fall season, we have a spring season. The summer now, I think, has got more crowded as players stay around in the summer. They take summer school, so there's an expectation you're on the court with them. You're doing summer camps, and then at a place like OU, you have a big recruiting budget. You're supposed to go spend it and travel here, there, and everywhere. And so there's not a lot of downtime. You're also, as I said, you're a jack of all trades. So even when you're not on the court with the players, there's plenty of other things you should be doing to make your program relevant. And so at 28, with a 3-year-old, a baby on the way, a wife who's moved from our family in Chicago to this new place that we're not familiar with. I think I did a terrible job recognizing just how challenging that was for my wife. And so for 3 years, I put my nose down. She was raising our two boys. And probably I prioritized my family, my kids and my wife, less than I did my job. And I justified it like, okay, I'm the breadwinner. I've got to work hard. If I'm not working hard and the team's not doing well, I don't have a job and I can't support my family. And there's some truth to that. But I just did a terrible job for 3 years. And honestly, after 3 years, I was burnt out. I was exhausted. I was very unhappy. We'd gone from being an unranked team, losing record for 4 years in a row, to after 3 years, we were top 20 in the country, second round of the NCAA tournament, everything going in the right direction. Last in the conference in the Big 12 to finishing second. On paper, it looked like, hey, you've done it. I went into at the end of the season, I went into my associate AD, who's my boss, and they gave me this huge raise. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars, 4 year, an extra 4 years on my contract, other little bonuses and things like that. And I walked out of that meeting probably the most unhappiest I've ever been. It sounds crazy, but was just questioning everything, like, can I do this for another 3 years? And unfortunately, through my unhappiness, myself and my wife split for a couple of years, and we were apart. And that was the most difficult, horrible experience I've ever gone through. But also happy that it occurred, because our relationship now is incredible. We've never been happier. We've never been closer. And we had to go through that to come out the other end. And we also had to go through that to also recognize that this wasn't the profession I wanted to be in for another 30 years, because it wasn't sustainable for me. Now, other coaches can figure out that balance, with their family, with their job. They have it all in the right place. They figure out, okay, sometimes a year are busier than others. I couldn't find that balance. I just couldn't do it. And not that I didn't try, but when I focused more on my family and myself and my self-care, the team did worse. We didn't do as well. And then when I focused on the team, my family life and my self-care went down. I couldn't figure it out. And I have so much respect for coaches that can, but for me, I couldn't get there. So those were the ups and downs on paper. Yeah, you turned around the program. The downs were, splitting, like destroying my family life, basically. So, and there's not many lower points than that. So yeah, when you look at people and their situation, and they've got it all figured out, they're crushing it, they're accomplishing all these goals that they set for themselves, etc. It often comes at a cost. You just don't know what that cost is. So yeah, challenging time.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty and just being open about that, because I don't think you're alone in that situation. And I know that you're not alone, because you've probably spoken with other coaches who are going through similar struggles. How then can administrators support coaches to help with this? Because if the pressure is there to win at all costs, the administration are going to burn through coaches and having to find a new coach and start again. And it becomes a cycle, which is unhealthy for everybody, including the success of the team. Do you have any suggestions? And I know you now have a different role. We'll talk about that in a second. But do you have any suggestions on how administrators might be able to support coaches better so that there is that balance that allows you to remain in the profession?
Yeah, honestly, Tim, I mean, my experience with administrators was very, very positive. Like, a lot of the pressure, it's internal. Like, we're putting this pressure on ourselves. We're setting these goals for ourselves. There is this kind of subtle, like, nobody sees what I'm doing on a daily basis now.
Right.
I don't have a record. I don't have a win and loss record that people are judging me on. But I think in your mind, because you're so focused on what you're doing on a daily basis, you're so in that world, you think everybody else is there joining you in that world. Like, that everybody else is going around caring as much about these wins and losses as you are. And what's happening with the team or not happening with the team. People don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But so even with the administration, like, I probably could have stayed at OU for another 10 years and, done an okay job. And hey, are you graduating players? Are they having a good experience? Do you have a good culture? Are you winning enough? It's not like you're going out and getting, drilled every week. I mean, that's not a great experience for the players either. So that's part of the experience. I think winning is part of the experience. But to what level, to what degree, how much does it really matter? So, my experience with administrators were that they actually had some perspective. I think it's us as coaches that lack that perspective and what's really important and where should I be putting my time and attention and worry? Maybe I should be putting it more, for my case, into my family and less into whether we're going to win this weekend or what does that mean and all the rest of it. So I think administrators, yes, could they learn more about the sport? Could they understand the nuances? Can they, make themselves available more regularly? Yes, they can, but everybody's spread so thin. I mean, I don't speak to anybody these days that say they have ample bandwidth. I mean, everybody's struggling with bandwidth, and so are these administrators. And so yeah, I mean, it's easy to be down on administrators. And look, like any industry, there's great administrators, there's terrible ones, and most of them are somewhere in the middle. They have their good and bad days.
I'm just wondering, perhaps, whether administrators can be that support system of, Dave, go home, right? You've done enough for today. And recognizing, because you're right. Any of us who are in coaching, we're self-starters. We push hard. If it's not working, we often push harder than we should. We are intent on success. We love competition. And so we're willing to maybe go the extra mile, as opposed to going, I need to back off right now. Sounds like you struggle with that. I know I struggle with that. I wonder sometimes if our quote unquote bosses can recognize some of that in us and go, you know what, take that vacation. It's okay to do it. You've got my permission, rather than kind of you're not going to take it because I might miss a recruit, or we've got that camp I've got to run. I think administrators may be able to help in that realm.
Yeah, I think they can. And I think it depends it might depend a little bit on the setup within the athletic department. I mean,
Sure.
where's the coach's offices? Where's the administrator's offices? Um, where are the tennis courts in relation to that? Again, are the administrators just coming out on match day when you're very focused on the team, or are they actually popping out on a Tuesday afternoon to maybe when you're a little bit more relaxed and practice is up and going? Yeah, I think administrators can do a better job of maybe developing that relationship. But I think there's maybe levels of tension there. There might be some subtle passive aggressiveness because the associate athletic director reports to an athletic director.
Yeah.
Hey, why isn't your tennis team doing better? What's going on there? Why are we getting this complaint or whatever it is? And also, under that is the associate athletic director. The teams that they're overseeing, they want to see have success because they want to move up in their career.
Absolutely.
So, but in terms of them, hey, take a day off. I think as a coach, you have so much flexibility anyway. Like nobody's really watching over you on a daily basis. And, on a Monday, if I want to go to the movie theater at 1:00 because we don't have practice, I could probably do that and nobody's going to know or care. And so I think you've got to be careful as a coach there because you don't want to lose that flexibility either. And so again, with all this, it's threading a needle. And a lot of these, I mean, I had in 8 years, I had 3 different administrators. So again, you're starting over. It's a new person, and they were all very different. I mean, so different. Their personalities were night and day. And so you're trying to learn more about them. What are their motivations? How do they want to communicate? How regular how often are they going to be around? What can you take to them? What do you need to hold back? But coaches need to take the lead there as well. I think, I could have done a better job of that as well. Just been more, pushing to meet more regularly with my administrators. I think they just trusted, hey, you're doing a good job. We'll leave you at it. There's nothing for us to say kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough
Well,
one.
leaving me alone is not necessarily a bad thing if you're doing well. Don't necessarily want the micromanaging either. You then left college coaching. Not an easy decision. What was the point where you said, okay, this is it. I'm done. Because in many ways, for any of us who've moved jobs, it is almost dare I say, a divorce, especially if you're happy where you are or things are going well where you are. It's a big risk.
Well, for me, I think because I was unhappy, it actually was a very easy decision.
Yeah, good point.
So I didn't struggle with that at all. I think I knew after myself and my wife reunited, I knew I was going in a different direction. I probably knew after 3 years of being a head coach that this wasn't a lifelong career for me. And so I think I spent the next few years thinking and contemplating about what is next for me. And I completed my master's in intercollegiate athletic administration. I knew I was going or wanted to go down that path, but it wasn't clear exactly how I was going to do that. But I didn't see myself, for some reason I had age 40 in my head. I guess when you're 30, 40 seems really old. But I didn't think I was going to coach beyond 40. For whatever reason, that was in my head. Now I coached till I was 36. I'm fortunate it was my decision. I mean, I had 3 years left in my contract and, could have stayed another 3 years. I ended up taking a pay cut for the next position that I took, but a lot of things aligned. I mean, an opportunity to go back to Ireland, expose my children to my culture back there, spend more time with my family, etc. And this position that was very administrative heavy, it gave me separation from my coaching days into being an administrator. And so, yeah, everything came together at the right time, and it was a very easy decision for me. And And you make that decision, but look, in the back of my head, there's some doubts there somewhere. And am I still going to feel this way in 6 months? Am I still going to feel this way in 12 months? But I think I knew if I really wanted to get back into college coaching, I could. I developed enough of a resume, enough contacts that opportunity was going to be there for me. So yeah, after 6 months, after 12 months, I was like, I definitely made the right decision, and I've never been happier.
What do you do now? Because a lot of people won't know what ITA is, Intercollegiate Tennis Association. Maybe people don't know what a COO is. What are your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, so the ITA is the Coaches Association and governing body of college tennis. So we oversee all 5 divisions of college tennis, and we do a little bit more than a lot of coaches associations. We run college tournaments. The NCAA take our rankings for their championships. We do our own rules. So we're that's kind of the governing body. Then the coaches associations, coach education, awards, things like that. So we're doing a lot. We have a staff of about 14. And as a COO, Chief Operating Officer, you're vacillating between being in the weeds of the day-to-day, making sure the lights are still on and the organization still chugging along. So you vacillate between the very small details to the big strategic initiatives, working with the CEO and the board of directors to implement those big strategic initiatives. So that's what I love about the job. Every day it's something a little bit different. So when I get bored of being in the spreadsheets and looking at the numbers, I can go work on some big project that we're trying to advance or implement in the coming months or years.
Where do you see the state of collegiate tennis, and in my interest, coaches? Are coaches well educated in collegiate tennis? Are they getting younger? Is it an older demographic? Where do you see us?
Yeah, it's firstly, I feel like we've got quite a lot of momentum right now coming out of COVID. During COVID, it was a very challenging time period. I mean, we lost about 60 programs over the course of 2 years. Since COVID, about 51 programs have either been reinstated or established for the first time. So that's been exciting to see, and hopefully that trend continues going forward. In terms of coaches, one of my responsibilities when I joined the ITA a few years ago was actually to develop year-round coach education opportunities, because traditionally the ITA had done an annual coaches convention and that was it. And so I established a coaches podcast. So I interview other coaches because I think that peer-to-peer learning is key. We developed a master class. So we have 25 chapters covering everything from player development to fundraising to marketing, social media, etc. So new coaches can come in and get up to speed as to what they should be focusing their energies on. We have a new coach orientation. We have a mentorship program now, a year-long mentorship program. And we developed our first credentialing program. So it's a 7-month, we call it Coach Up. And so we take coaches through about 7 modules where they're learning again some of the key components away from the court. We're not necessarily touching the X's and O's. There's lots of information out there. Coaches can go get certified in with other groups, etc. So we're really focusing on kind of the coach as a CEO mentality. And so it's been great to see the response to that, the interest. What I've been so surprised about, Tim, as you talk about the demographics, is just, to me, I thought it was like coaches in their 20s would be interested in it. But we've got coaches that have been coaching for 3 decades who joined our credential program. And that was to me, that was the most amazing thing, and so exciting that these coaches are still trying to get better, still trying to learn. And so I think the tennis industry as a whole has got much older, from administrators to coaches to officials. And that's a concern that I think national governing bodies across the world, not just in the USA, are dealing with now. How do we get more young people involved in all aspects of the sport? And I think especially the USTA are going to be putting a lot more resources to that going forward. I think with the college coaching, I think our demographics are a little younger because a lot of college tennis players, they don't necessarily want to do the 10 hours at a club now, that the days of just churning out those lessons one after the other. I think that whole business model has to change. That's exhausting. I did it for some summers. It's a difficult job. And I think 22, 23-year-olds are looking at that going, I want no part of that, but this college coaching stuff sounds cool, and they had a good experience. So I think we're always going to have that next generation coming through. It's how you keep them. How do you prevent them from having the experience that I had? How do you help them through that, hold their hand, provide support system, which we have a new coach support group as well. We have these coaches circles that we do, these monthly calls with different groups. So we're trying to implement these things to help keep coaches in this industry for longer, because if the coaches dry up, then these programs dry up. If you don't have a coach for a program, then that's the end of the program, or probably close to it. So yeah, we're doing a lot, but we can always do more.
All right. Well, in closing, I just ask for advice for coaches based on your experiences now as an administrator, formerly as a coach. What advice would you like to pass on to other coaches who may be in the profession or looking to even get in the profession?
Yeah, for those in the profession, I think maybe what's most helpful is when I reflect on sometimes I think about, okay, if I was to go back to coaching tomorrow, what would I do differently? Because as a coach, you don't have a lot of time to reflect, unfortunately, and you're just so in it. But when you're removed from it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you can go, oh, wow, I really sucked at this, or I sucked at that. And what can I do? What would I do differently the next time? One of the things is I was very anti-parent. It's like part of the reason I got into college coaching. I didn't want to deal with parents. And I found over the years, I started my coaching career in the early 2000s and in 2016. In that 11, 12-year period, things changed. The players were a little bit different. The parents were more involved. And I think I fought against that. I just didn't want to have anything to do with parents. And I think that mindset would be very different. And also when I moved back to Ireland, in my spare time, I would help junior players, identify a place in America to take their talents and come over on a scholarship. And it was amazing to me just how involved the parents were and how critical they were in that decision-making process. I think I underestimated that as a coach. So I would spend a lot more time with the parents. I'd spend a lot more time recruiting the parents, and recognizing just how influential they are with, the 16, 17-year-old, that they're, they want to land in a good space and have a good experience. So the parenting is a big part of it. The other areas, I think, is just patience with freshmen. I think I wasn't as patient with, again, not recognizing that an 18-year-old today is not the same 18-year-old as in 1998. They're just not. And for whatever reason, we want to say technology, helicopter parenting, whatever it is. And so my expectations were unrealistic. I didn't adapt my expectations as the generation changed. And so I think you have to be a lot more patient with your freshmen. I think it's just going to take them longer and longer to figure out what it is to be part of a team, to actually gain some perspective. I think a lot of these players lack perspective. They think they're better than they are. They think they're going to come in and dominate, and you have to help manage their expectations, and you have to do it slowly. So that would be that would be some advice for current coaches, for coaches interested in coming into the industry. I think it's putting yourself out there. It's volunteering your time. It's giving, hours to whatever aspect within your industry that will allow you to meet others. Say yes to every opportunity, educate yourself, develop, that lifelong learning mentality, and be able to share that with anybody who's interested, whether it's somebody interviewing. But I think you've got to be willing to pay your dues. Again, I think this next generation, they expect a great working environment. They expect to be paid a lot of money. They expect kind of instant success because they're living in this, instant world, I guess. And I think those that separate themselves are the ones that are just willing to, give their time freely, say yes, volunteer their time, willing to pay their dues.
I'm taking notes. Good quotes, good comments. Last question then. If somebody has a question, they're listening to our podcast, a later date, watching on YouTube, how do they get in touch with you?
Email's the best. It's just dmullins, Mullins at itatennis.com. So I am on email more than I would like, but I try and respond as quickly as I can, and always happy to have conversations with coaches. And that's the best part of my job, Tim. I mean, I love when I get to interact with coaches, whether it's on the phone, on a video call like this, or especially in person. That's where I'm happiest. It's not coaching the next generation of tennis players coming through, but it's helping coaches in any way I possibly can. I can absolutely empathize with the challenges that they face on a daily basis.
And just to reiterate, it is dmullins at itatennis.com. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your honesty and sharing a little bit of your expertise, and do hope that people reach out to you with any questions they might have. Just a reminder, everybody, we try to interview people every couple of weeks or so. We actually have a pretty heavy schedule over the next 6 weeks. Got a lot of guests, so we might actually be weekly coming up. But for now, my thanks to Dave Mullins. I'm Tim Baghurst, and thanks so much for watching.